Okay, well, good afternoon. My name is Matt Ward. I am so incredibly proud to serve as the Vice Chair of Reach Edmonton Council Board of Directors. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to our 2022 Annual General Meeting. You will find a copy of today's package in the folder on your tables, and that will be helpful throughout the rest of our meeting, according to my notes. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered on Treaty 6 territory and Métis Nation number 4, territory that has been an important gathering place for diverse Indigenous peoples for generations. I encourage everyone here today to think about your relationship to this territory, the important role we all play as treaty people here in Amiskwaciy-Waskahigan. At this time, I would like to introduce Jan Fox to offer protocol and invite Elder Bert Auger to share a blessing.
Thank you, Matt. And I just wanted to acknowledge, too, that Matt had to step up to the plate at very short notice. Donna is unfortunately unable to be with us today because Grant is not well, and she's taking care of him. I hope we're keep him in our prayers. So it's as was mentioned, I'm Jan Fox. I'm the Executive Director here at Reach Edmonton, and I'm extremely honored to introduce and welcome Elder Bert Auger.
Thank you very much, Elder Auger. One of the things that drew me to moving back to Edmonton after living in Vancouver several years is getting to go to events and hear my language spoken, something that a lot of Indigenous people don't get. So I'm really grateful for that and for your prayer today. So thank you. It is a pleasure to be here in person. Whoa, very weird. But also exciting, especially after 2 years of virtual events, a virtual presentation of protocol, which is can be challenging. And so I'm just really pleased to have the opportunity to meet many of you in person, and as I will, I'm sure, over the rest of the evening. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. I will now officially call the 2022 Reach Annual General Meeting to order. And before we get started, I will quickly run through a few technical considerations. We have many folks joining us virtually. So for folks who are online, if you could please type your full name and organization in the chat box so that we can accurately record your attendance in our minutes. And as folks are doing that, I will just let everyone know that this shouldn't last more than an hour and a half, and that the folks online have been muted, so we can't hear you in this room if you're trying to talk to us. There is a chat function there. So if you are online and having any issues, please message tech support through that chat function and they would be happy to help you. Okay, to start us off, I'll invite our Executive Director, Jan Fox, to present a year in review at Reach Edmonton. Please welcome Jan.
Yes, in case you didn't hear what Matt was saying, isn't it great to be here in person? In person. Yeah, I saw several people who I have never met before. I feel like I know you because I've seen you on Zoom, like Shalini. It was so nice to actually see. I said I recognize that smile anywhere, but really, really amazing to see you all. So also thank you, Elder Auger. That was very, very meaningful. And yeah, it just really touched my heart. Thank you for your kind words, but thank you for thinking about so many others who are suffering in the world today. And we think of Ukraine, of course. And so thanks. So I'm so proud to celebrate another incredible year at Reach. And I'm so grateful that many of us are able to be here together. And I'd like to welcome those of you who are joining us virtually as well. I didn't think I'd so much like the hybrid version, but it's kind of nice because we know that there can be so many more people that might not otherwise have been able to join us. So I have the honor now of going through some key highlights of the year. But I just need to begin by saying and telling you just how hard the Reach team worked again this year as we once again navigated absolutely unprecedented change. We are so grateful also to our many and diverse partners who walked alongside us to create safer communities. So I'm just going to go through a few of the highlights, some things that we did this year, as we began to move back a little bit into normalcy. I just want to start with one of our favorite projects, and that's our neighborhood organizing initiative. And that continued to expand this year, helping communities with acute safety and well-being issues to better develop community-designed resources. A great example of this was the development of the Chinatown Safety Council, which convened social agencies, businesses, city departments, and community groups to address complex issues like encampments and concentrated poverty. Our 24/7 crisis diversion team was very active again, as you can imagine, and they selflessly continued to provide critical frontline support. During the pandemic, the crisis teams became the primary form of transit for vulnerable communities affected by COVID-19. We also built stronger relationships this year through the YEG Ambassador Program. Community safety ambassadors are now part of the program and help businesses develop positive relationships with vulnerable community members. And at the direction of our board, and because we really think this is an important way to go, we really relied a lot more heavily on data-informed decision-making. It played a big role and will continue to do so in the future. In partnership with the data engineer, our REACH data engineer, the City of Edmonton and Edmonton Police Service, this has helped to enhance our work. And we've been using this data to determine how we can communicate and improve our many outcomes. Last year, we were able to implement the updated 24/7 Edmonton App, which collects information for the 24/7 Crisis Diversion Program. Data collected through this app has helped inform program partners of the critical issues facing Edmontonians experiencing crisis. As you know, there's been an enormous amount of overdose deaths in Edmonton, sadly, and responding to the overdose deaths brought about by the opioid crisis, REACH collaborated with the City of Edmonton Partners in Drug Poisoning Prevention on numerous drug prevention initiatives. The Addictions Don't Discriminate exhibit shared stories of addiction and recovery of individuals with lived experience and was featured at the Addictions Don't Discriminate interactive exhibit at the Stanley Milner Library. I'm really proud to tell you that this exhibit has a capacity to travel, and it has already been seen in many other communities. It has been brought, and we've had more requests, I think, than we can manage. In addition to better understand addictions and the opioid crisis, REACH, in collaboration with Partners in Drug Poisoning Prevention, hosted an engagement in Macaulay. Community members were invited to share their thoughts and experiences with the crisis, where insights were used to inform future responses. We're continuing this work in partnership with a number of individuals with a grant from the federal government to hopefully do better engagement and to enhance our responses to the opioid crisis. And in terms of our out-of-school time programming, to better align the activities of children and youth services in the city, the out-of-school time received federal funding from Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada to develop a child and youth services map for Edmonton. This digital map is a database of over 180 child and youth services in our city. The continued development of dashboards was indeed the focus of 2021. Through the development of data dashboards, REACH initiatives have been able to take data snapshots to help guide decision-making. One such example is a dashboard for the 24/7 Crisis Diversion Program, where each partner has access to a program dashboard designed to meet their resource management needs and track the performance of the crisis response teams. So in ensuring transparency between REACH and the communities we serve, it's important that trust be a key component to successful collaborations. Being established for more than a decade now, which is hard to believe, REACH considered it to be timely to re-engage both current and former community partners to assess our vision and its approach to work and our approach to working towards it. The result of the challenge dialogue over the past 18 months has helped REACH's board, staff, and partners realign their strategies to better reflect the feedback and the needs of the community. One approach to affect broad-reaching systems change is by influencing policy. And we talked a lot about our role in advocacy. In 2021, as you probably know, there was an increase of hate-motivated violence in our city. Concerned newcomer parents wanted to address the growing issues in schools in Edmonton. So REACH convened newcomer communities and the Edmonton Public School Board to have a community conversation around the ongoing issue. We're also very proud of our work with Coalitions Creating Equity. In partnership with the Alberta Hate Crimes community, it's working with legal experts to revise the Alberta Criminal Code to include a definition to better classify hate crimes in the province. The inclusion of hate crimes definition in the criminal code will help support victims and communities seeking justice in response to hate crime incidents in the province. As you can see, that's the theme of tonight. We'll be having a panel on that in a little few minutes here. I also wanted to mention another program that we're particularly proud of, and that's the Safer Way Out program. And that's our first foray into human trafficking. I was very honored to be part of the Premier's Task Force on Human Trafficking, and also proud that they accepted almost all but one of our recommendations, and we're moving forward with that. But we were successful in receiving funding in partnership with Kate Quinn. I think Kate was coming. I don't know. There she is. Hi, with Kate to implement a really important program with ways, working with the alert team, the police team, to help find victims of human trafficking get out of that life. And I really want to compliment our team for that because they worked really hard to do it. And we are also convening a provincial-wide committee to help address these issues. So now I think we're going to put up a slide of the incredible REACH team. I don't think there's pictures, guys, so you don't have to hide under the table. There you go. All of this important, of course, could never be done alone. And I continue to be humbled and thankful for the passion that each member of the REACH team brings into the workforce every day. I also would like to thank our partners for their willingness to continue connecting, checking in, holding us accountable as we work together to adapt and shift, to collaborate and connect. I also wanted to take this opportunity to thank and recognize, and unfortunately she couldn't be here today because she's under the weather, Tia Abdullahi. Tia has been a volunteer with REACH since May 2012, 10 years of volunteer at REACH. She started as an intern and was one of our volunteers. Thea was instrumental in bringing in other volunteers to help grow the program to what it is today. During her tenure with us, she has been a great ambassador, mentor, and inspirational to other youth volunteers. She's also been a committed, compassionate, and reliable volunteer in supporting the work of REACH initiatives in the communities. Her contributions have been many over the years, but I just wanted to point out a few. Firstly, she created an extensive list of frontline service agencies in Edmonton that has been used internally and shared externally with partners and stakeholders. She's conducted research and support for presentations to community groups at outreach events. And she supported REACH training, workshops, conferences, and multiple community safety events. So I do have a small gift for her, I was going to say at this point, as a token of our appreciation, but we'll get that to her. So also, you will find a brochure on your table for more information on becoming a volunteer as a member of REACH. We have just, I wish I could remember the number, but it has just increased so much under the wonderful leadership of Kelly Holland, who you would have met at the front. And our volunteers have just done so much to help us in our work. So thank you to everyone for partnering, for implementing, evaluating, and for rethinking ways on how we can all work together to continue to contribute, to empower our communities, and make Edmonton a safer place to be. Matt, I'm going to turn it back over to you for the board chair report.
I know, it's like, which side? We talked about the volunteers, but we didn't really get a chance to actually celebrate them, so maybe just a round of applause for all of our volunteers over the last year. It's really would not be possible to do the scale of the work without them. So thank you so much, Jan, for that update. I realize I speak for the board, so I'm like looking over at the board members for approval. I think I speak for the board when I say I'm very proud of the impact that REACH is having on strengthening safety. Strengthening safety in our communities. A result, as Jan has highlighted, of all of the collaborative efforts and nurtured relationships with REACH, our partners, and community members. I'm happy to now provide members with an update on the work of the board since the last AGM. So throughout 2021, we continued our more frequent meeting schedule, hosting a generative discussion topic every second month to bring bigger picture perspectives to the challenges facing our society. This included looking at what REACH needs to consider for our next 10 years, leading to the development of our bold new vision. Thank you, Stephen, for the support in developing that. The role of advocacy in our work, and continued dialogue and action regarding equity, diversity, and inclusion. Despite the frequent meetings, for many of the board members in attendance, as was mentioned earlier, today's the first time several of us are actually meeting in person. So hello, board members that I am now meeting in person for the first time. I am most proud that this group of diverse and skilled individuals is committed and passionate about REACH and its mission, and how eager they all are to improve and strengthen our organization and community. Now that we've highlighted this past year's accomplishments, we will start the business portion of our meeting. So I'm looking for Christy, but I think I can confirm that we have quorum amongst the voting members in attendance. You will see we will be using poll questions for voting purposes for those who are joining us virtually. When a motion is made, we will wait about 20 seconds to vote, and then the vote will be displayed. Please note that only REACH members are permitted to vote in the polls. If you are attending in person, I ask that you raise your hand to vote in favor of the motion. After this meeting, the 2021 annual report will be posted on our website. You can find a copy of it as well within those packages on your table. Do take some time to review. There's lots of updates and snapshots of what has once again been an interesting, inspiring, and exciting year for REACH Edmonton. Okay, so our question, I guess. So may I have a motion to receive and adopt the 2021 REACH annual report? Thank you. And seconder, please. Thanks. Can I have the vote now? Just waiting for the online folks. Okay, can we display the vote? There we go. Motion carried. Thank you. Okay. May I have, okay, sorry. I'm getting lost in all of the motions we have. I'll try to keep it simple. So as part of the AGM package, you will find the 2021 AGM minutes. And for those joining us virtually, these were emailed to all members in advance of this meeting as part of the board package. If there are any questions, comments, or corrections, you can type them in the chat now or raise your hand. I'm seeing no hands in the room. Do we have any comments in the chat? Seeing none. So may I have a motion to approve the 2021 AGM minutes? Thank you. And seconder, please. Thank you. Please vote now. Thank you for those in the room who raised your hand, and we're just waiting a moment for those online. I would say a rehearsal, I feel like we need like Jeopardy music or something in between as a filler. Please display. And the motion is carried. Next, I would like to ask REACH Board Treasurer Lee Newton to present the 2021 financial report. We should have a slide here too.
Thank you, Matt. I know this is what everybody's here for specifically because it's the most exciting part of the AGM, obviously. On that note, I will keep it brief, I promise, but we just have to go through a few things. My name is Lee Newton, and I'm the treasurer for REACH Edmonton. And in the meeting package, and also on the screen here, is a copy of the 2021 financials. And this is just a brief summary of it. You'll find the full audited statements in your annual report. REACH is audited annually by an external auditor just to make sure that our finances are accurately reported and the proper governance is in order for not only our funders, but our members, our partners, and the community that we serve. So KPMG is our external auditor, and I'm pleased to say they issued a clean audit report, and there was no significant deficiencies found. So thank you to each finance team for all your hard work and amazing financial reporting. So a couple highlights to go through. There's some on the screen, but you can also look in your annual report, as I mentioned earlier. So our main funder is the City of Edmonton, and they provided just under $5.5 million for our operations, which allows REACH to carry out our mandate. Other grants and contributions were just over $1.9 million, and these are for initiatives including the RAP Ed program, All In for Youth, Bridging Together, Coalitions Creating Equity, the REACH Immigrant and Refugee Initiative, Sector Emergency Response to COVID-19, Safer Way Out, and the Neighborhood Organizing Initiative. Total program expenses, which are directly for us to run the programs, were just under $5.5 million, which was 75% of our total expenditure for the year. And then the other 25% was our general and administrative expenses, which includes finance, operations, IT expense, and our core staffing costs, which is all those people that we highlighted earlier to help run REACH. That was just under 1.8 million and just under 25%, like I said earlier. So overall, we were in a deficit position of $168,843. But this was planned, so it's very important to note that. In the previous 2 years, we had a surplus, and there was some programming, essential programming, that was either running out of funding or funding was tight, and we specifically took some extra money to help ensure that those programs continued. So it was planned. It was on purpose, we promise. So that is the brief overview of our 2021 financial reports. If there's any questions, feel free to ask them now or put them in the chat box. I don't see any here. Is there any questions in the chat box? Yes, I can. Okay. Okay. There's some issues with voting online. So I don't know, what do you mean by issues? Oh. Okay. It seems like there's a team doing things back there, but thank you. No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. It's very interesting hearing you just speak from the rafters, though. I'm like, is this just me that can hear him? Can you guys hear him too? We'll just give a couple minutes to work out some technical difficulties. Okay, and just to repeat in case anyone didn't hear that, so the poll is malfunctioning slightly. For the future votes, we're just going to have you raise your hand, that little icon and we'll count those up. We have people on that. So we haven't done any for the finance yet, so we're good. Andrew stopped right before that, so we're good. Okay, so any questions, I guess? Were there any questions in the chat box? I'm assuming no. Great. We'll just carry on. No follow-up questions on the financials allowed? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so now to a couple motions here. I now move to approve the 2021 audited financial statements. Can I have a seconder? Bob, thank you. And then we will vote on that. And then remember, if you're virtual, please just do the raise hand icon. So all in favor of approving the financials. Great. How's it looking online? We're good. Okay. Oh, okay. Hold on, everybody. Keep going. Hold on. Keep going. The poll is working now. Okay, the poll is working again, everybody. So, great news. But I'm assuming that was carried in the, okay, that one was carried. So now we move on to the selection of the auditor for 2022. So previously we used KPMG, and we think that's working well. So the board of directors is recommending we use KPMG for 2022. I now move to approve them as the auditors for 2022. Do I have a seconder? Bob again, thank you. All in favor? And then we'll see the poll from online. Perfect. Thank you so much. That is it for me. Matt?
Yes, thank you very much, Lee. Walking us through those financials and the motions, really appreciate that. Okay, now on to the next order of business, election of the new REACH board directors, which is very exciting. So in your meeting package, there is a document with photos and bios of this year's slate of nominees and board members standing for re-election. We have 5 new nominees standing for election and 1 board member standing for re-election. So can I ask the nominees attending virtually to turn on their cameras if they aren't, so folks can see you? We'll get that working. And then if I mention you and you're in the room, and standing up and giving a wave to folks. Okay, so the board's recommended 2022-23 nominees include the following. We'll start with Nick Lilly, who is currently a co-chair of the Downtown Recovery Task Force and principal of Growth Spark Management Consultancy. In 2020, he served as interim executive director of the Downtown Business Association of Edmonton, providing strategic direction, public relations, and managerial oversight of the organization on behalf of its 1,400 member businesses to support, enrich, and connect the downtown. He is now the executive director of Home Ed, an organization committed to providing affordable housing to Edmontonians. Okay. Shall I keep going? Okay. Next is Noel Chin. Noel Chin is currently one of 9 partners at Metric Group LLP Chartered Professional Accountants. With more than a decade working in the accounting field, his experience ranges from a legislative auditor at the Office of the Auditor General of Alberta, supervisor of management accounting at a utility company, and his current position in public practice. The next member is Dr. Jared Wesley, who is an associate professor in the Department of Political Science at the University of Alberta, where he is leading the creation of a new Master of Arts in Policy Studies. In his academic work, he has built professional linkages between political scientists and public policy professionals through research, teaching-based initiatives, such as the Café Pracademique Initiative and Edmonton Ward Boundary Commission. Our next member is Candace Cleveland. Hi, Candace, welcome. I love your skirt. Candace is currently a senior manager at Bent Arrow Traditional Healing Society, where she manages 2 group homes for youth involved in children's services and manages the Sacred Circle Family Intervention Program, among many other responsibilities. We're very excited to have you. Next is Yusuf Takal. Hi, Yusuf, thank you so much. Great to meet you. Yusuf Takal holds an MBA from Wilfrid Laurier University and has more than a decade of professional experience in the academic, nonprofit, and public sectors. He served as a policy analyst at the YMCA corporate office and pay and integrity officer at Public Services and Procurement Canada. Welcome, Yusuf. We do also have one current board member standing for re-election. This is Adel Hassan. Hi. You have to stand just like everybody else, yes. Adel has served one 3-year term with the REACH board and had been part, and during, whoa, sorry, those are, okay. It's super important. I will get it. Okay, one 3-year term with the REACH board and has worked on the Governance and Nominations Committee. As a politically active citizen, Adel has worked on many of the past mayor leadership campaigns and is very active in the community. So we're excited that you're staying on. So now I need a motion. So I guess I will make the motion to approve the slate of nominees for the 2022 to 2025 term. Can I get a seconder? Bob? Sorry, Lee, he was just a hair faster. Thank you, Bob. And can I get everyone to vote now? Thank you. And can we display the vote? Awesome. The motion is carried. So welcome to all of our new REACH board members. I will now ask Jan to come up.
Thank you, Matt. Good job. Thanks, everyone. And welcome to the new board members and the not so new ones, Adel, but glad to have you. And we have, as you can see, we're pretty blessed to have an incredible board. But this is the part of the AGM that I dislike the most. And that's because I need to say goodbye to our outgoing board members. REACH continues to be very thankful for the dedication of our board members who are champions, ambassadors, and cheerleaders for us. We also very much appreciate their oversight and how diligently they work to set a vision for us. I'm just going to now take this opportunity to thank our departing board members and recognize them for their commitment and dedication to REACH over the past years. As a small token of our appreciation, each departing board member will be receiving the coveted REACH pyramid. So this is to thank you for all the time and your thoughtful commitment. For those attending in person, I'm going to ask you to come to the stage and I will give you your pyramid. But we're going to start with virtual, and that's Nick Zazula. Nick joined the REACH board in 2020 as a delegate from the Youth at the Table program. That's a project operated by Volunteer Alberta and has been very successful. He greatly benefited from gaining experience with a not-for-profit governance board and mentorship of other board members. And he also agreed to stay on an additional year as the youth advisor to the REACH board. And during that time, he gave so much to us. He worked on the board governance and nominations committee, and he was just an absolute pleasure to have. We're going to miss you very much, Nick, and maybe we can have a coffee and I'll bring you your pyramid. And I know for a fact, I think I heard anyway, that Lux is online. Yes, I think. Okay, great. So Lux served on the REACH board for 1 year. They have worked in the not-for-profit sector across Alberta for their entire career in progressively increasing leadership roles. They have mentored youth and have extensive frontline experience with those experiencing housing insecurity and homelessness while working with youth and families. In May, just of this year in 2022, Lux made the big move to Ottawa to take on the exciting role of the executive director with the 10 Oaks project. Lux, I so enjoyed working with you and we'll greatly miss your insights and especially your amazing sense of humor. I hope we all stay connected. But now my first person that is here, and again, I feel very sad to say goodbye to, and that is to Lee Newton. Lee Newton served 1 term on the REACH board as the board treasurer and the chair of the finance committee. She was unable to seek re-election because of her work commitments, not because we didn't want her. I want to make that very clear, because we certainly did, right? That's right, Sandra, right? She will be greatly missed, but she is one very busy lady. Thank you, Lee, for the great oversight and the support to the finance team. We so appreciated your incredible commitment to our work. You were and will continue to be a great ambassador, we know. Well, there was a card here for you because I wrote it. Anyway, there. Oh, they stuck it in the bag. There you go. Let me see. Take care. Thank you again, Lee. The ever-efficient Christy put all the cards I wrote into the bags, which is why I couldn't find them while I was looking for them up here. Okay. So next, Shamin. Shamin wasn't able to come in the end, right? Am I right about that? She's not here. Okay, thank you, Kelly. Shamin was elected in 2021, and she was part of the Finance and Audit Committee. She is an assistant professor of child and youth care here at MacEwan University and a counselor providing support to children, youth, and families. Shamin has experience working with Edmonton Police Service and other social agencies with research on understanding the histories of immigrant youth who are being criminalized. Shamin is going to be accepting a new position outside of Edmonton, so will not be able to continue her role with REACH, sadly. And the next person that is here probably needs no introduction to most people, but that's Bob Phelp, as we know him, Bob, or the old white guy on the board. Is that? Sorry, I wasn't supposed to say that. Adel made me do it. Yeah, that's why you're leaving the board. I am kidding, and you know it. I'm getting back at him because he a little earlier in the night offered to get somebody a lawyer to fight me, so we're just getting him. Anyways, enough about that. Bob served on the REACH board for 2 3-year terms for 6 years. He was involved in the board nominations and recruitment, board governance, and he was a mentor for the Youth at the Table project that I just mentioned a minute ago for 3 terms. Bob served in his other life as a chief of the commission and tribunals of the Alberta Human Rights Commission from 2014 to 2017. Bob brought, of course, an extensive legal background and judicial experience, including 29 years in the practice of law and 9 years as an Alberta Provincial Court judge and 7 years as deputy judge of the Northwest Territorial Court. Bob is also a member of the Youth at the Table project participants and continues to be active on many other boards throughout the community, including, I think, Boyle Street. So please come and get your pyramid. He also has a good sense of humor, I think.
After 6 years, I finally got a name tag, too.
Uh-huh. You know what happened to the other 3 we gave him, right? Okay. So last but not least, very sad to say goodbye to someone you've spent some time with this evening, and that's the incredible Matt Ward. Matt was elected to the REACH board in 2019. This year, Matt, as you know, served as vice chair of the REACH board, as well as working on the governance and nominations committee. He also was active in the Youth at the Table program and really helped mentorship there. With a background in community-based research and Indigenous studies, Matt was an incredible addition to our board. In fact, today, we were so grateful to have him when we were with City Council at a Lunch and Learn, and the credibility he brought and the understanding of the sector really helped us in our pitch. Matt, you also helped so much with our EDI work and our efforts to increase board diversity. And I know that because of work commitments and changes in life, you're moving on, but I know that you'll continue to be a strong ambassador for REACH too. So thank you so very much. Cards in there, I promise. Thanks. Okay, so now we're come to the part you all came for. I know, actually, sorry, Lee, it was the finance report, but this is also very, very good. So I'm so pleased to have a panel of guests and partners joining us today. But before we do that, I'm very pleased to introduce a short video that we would like to share with you all around the topic of unpacking hate, understanding and responding to hate crimes in our community.
In the pandemic and COVID, we have seen, no racialized groups been kind of left untouched in a negative way, in Canada, around the world. And so I think that highlights some of that embedded, bias and discrimination that we still have in our country.
What you saw last couple of years here, especially the summer of 2021 in Edmonton, where you saw a lot of hate crimes against female Black community members, Somalian, Muslim, really came to the forefront then. And then, with the advent of Trump and Trumpism and the nod, I guess, for lack of a better term, to empower people that are kind of far-right extremists to kind of move into a gap that they've always wanted to go into. And so you saw kind of this proliferation and empowerment across North America, across the world, actually.
The vast majority of it's online, and it's so anonymous that you can just say whatever hateful thing you want to say and there's very little repercussions.
Hate crimes always happened. I mean, my own childhood was pretty awful. There was attacks all the time. It always happens. The difference now is that there's more attention, there's more media reporting of what's happening, there's more ability to pay attention to the fact that these are happening, and there is more hopefulness amongst communities targeted that they will be heard, and so there's more reporting.
We developed Stop Hate, which is one of Canada's first third-party hate reporting tools that allow Albertans to at least document hate incidents, because oftentimes when you don't document, it's like it didn't happen.
Our experiences generationally have given us very different ways of seeing and very different points of view. And we're going to need the ways, the culture, the points of view of those most marginalized in society to lead and to form solutions going forward.
So one of the things now we are trying to work on in the work that I'm doing is trying to develop like a baseline of community support for victims of hate. So it doesn't matter, which community you might belong to. If you're reaching out to your community organization, we want those organizations to have like at least a baseline understanding of what victims of hate might be needing in terms of support.
It affects people in my community or just young people as a whole so drastically. It really made me interested in, why is nothing being done about it? Why is it not being taught about in schools? Why is there not enough education about it? What else can we do? What can, as young people, can we actually take to stop this issue? I reached out to the Organization for the Prevention of Violence, another Edmonton-based organization, and we want to, let's get young people involved, let's set up some sort of youth initiative. But first, it's important that we base it in research and we base it in like true data and findings. We ask people if they have encountered hate or extremism online. We provide definitions, and then we ask them if you've experienced it. If you have, how did you respond? And then going forward, what are some solutions that we can address this issue? I learned a bunch of things. There's a lot that we got out of it. And some of the key points is that a ton of young people experience or have encountered hate or extremism online.
It quickly ripples into the community and manifests that kind of fear and insecurity, anxiety, anger, wanting retaliation. If you could imagine getting assaulted, right, punched because of your race. The next day, that person that's been punched is feeling all those things. Like they can't hide their identity. So just walking out of their home or their place of work or their place of worship or their place of play is causing them great distress. Not only them, but also the community members. They understand that they could be next. There is really no hate crime section in the criminal code. But beyond that, if there's an assault that's committed, they're not charged with the hate crime, they're charged with the assault. We have a crime that terrorizes communities. It sends all those impacts out there. And we don't have legislation for it to protect those communities. With a hate crime section, you have your officers starting to understand what hate crime is. So they move into understanding hate crime, recognizing it quicker, recording it, identifying it, and investigating it, and writing it as a hate crime section.
How do we do this? I think we come together in communities. We need to invest in education on anti-racism.
I've also learned that young people truly believe that education, young people educating young people, is the best approach to solving hate and extremism. My initiative is making workshops so that we're teaching junior high students, so before they get to high school, what they're about to go into, like before they're at that level, learn about the issue, learn what is hate, learn what is extremism, and then you can be a little more responsible and a little more aware. It's about, not clicking on the extremist content, not clicking on the hateful content, not getting into all that negativity that's online, and really just trying to promote empathy and education instead.
So I would like to change the criminal code and see a hate crime section for sure. I think it's necessary in Canada. Yes, it's hard work, but it's the right thing to do. Sometimes the right thing to do is inconvenient. It just is, and it's hard, but it's the right thing for a number of reasons.
I think it's just getting people comfortable to know how to intervene, and that you can intervene in very, very safe ways that allow the issue to get addressed. Because the biggest challenge is if no one intervenes, it almost feels like it's tacit approval.
So we need to learn how to empower grassroots BIPOC community organizations to do things differently outside of the system, and we need to acknowledge that those who have been leading within the system who haven't been able to solve this problem, it's because they're missing a piece and they can't do it.
I would now like to introduce our moderator for today, Dr. Stephen Murgatroyd, and just to let you know that it was his company that produced that amazing video that we just saw, and I think lots of kudos to Trevor for that. So beautiful job. Thank you very much. Dr. Murgatroyd is an acknowledged expert on innovation policy and practice, an author of over 40 books, and a frequent contributor to radio and news media. He's a skilled communicator and expert facilitator, widely regarded as a humorist. Yes, he really is. The first joke, when I first met him, first thing he told me is that he was so old, his blood type had been discontinued. That's just I tell that joke to everybody. I think it's crazy hilarious. He's an imaginative speaker, having provided over 400 keynote addresses to conferences in 21 countries. Over the years, Stephen has continued to work closely in various capacities with the entire REACH team, as well as the REACH board members, along with engaging with community partners and the facilitation of the challenge dialogue I spoke about a little earlier. We are so grateful that you are part of our team, and I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce your distinguished panelists.
Thank you, Jen. The truth is, I just can't keep a steady job. So yeah, I am old. I'm approaching 72. My first encounter with racism was at school. So I went to school in Bradford in Yorkshire, which my father said, if ever the world had piles, that's where they'd be. It's an interesting little community. But I went to an all-boys school, 865 boys, one black boy, one. On day one, I was in a fight to defend him. I then formed a support group to work with Helmut, who became a great family friend and a great friend of many of us in the school. But I found I also had to tackle not just the other kids, but some of the staff. And that's when I began to understand the origins of some of this work. I was 11. And I've been working on these kind of issues one way or another ever since. So it's a great privilege to introduce the stars of the video. If you could join me here on stage, please. Come on up. The time is right. Now we're going to do this in two parts. The first part will be me helping the panel share more, and exploring further some of the things they were saying on the video. And then after a while, we'll turn it over to an open conversation with the people online and the people in the room. We will be finished no later than 6 o'clock, just so you know. Don't panic, my record for public speaking is 12 hours and 11 minutes. So you've seen this crew on film, and rather than introduce each of them personally now, I'm going to ask them just to give some context when I ask them some questions. So for the first, as I ask you the first question, just give us a bit more background as to why you're in this, on this panel, why this issue matters to you. And I'm going to start with Stephen, not just because it's a good name. Why is it so important to change the criminal? You have to press the button and hold it until it goes green. There you go. Why is it so important to change the criminal code? Will that make any real difference, or is this just tidying up some kind of legislative thing? Do you think this will really change the way we tackle hate crime?
Yes, I do. I'm Steve. When I was a member of the police service for 30 years, retired as a staff sergeant at a homicide section, but in my 30 years there I created the Edmonton Police Service Hate Crimes Unit and been involved in the hate crime training and educational components and criminal code change and a number of other initiatives in regard to this issue. So that's how I became involved in this, working with the Alberta Hate Crime Committee as a volunteer for the last 22 years as well. The criminal code right now has sections that are relevant to hate propaganda, 318 and 319. It's about, for lack of a better term, to simplified hate speech. And then there's a 430, 4.1 section, which is mischief to what used to be religious property, or it's been expanded now to include property used by identified communities. Beyond that, there really is no charge section in the criminal code. Is a 718 sentencing hearing to increase sentencing for those convicted of a crime where it was hate motivated. And that's about it. Every other crime in the criminal code we'd process through the criminal justice system as an assault or a mischief or uttering threats or an arson or a murder or whatever, and the hate crime component is gone. Is it important? Yes. I'll go with the dry stuff first. Statistically, as you saw in the police reported hate crimes, 1%, compared to, it was 1,900 in 2019 and then 2,667, I think, in 2020, as opposed to 233,000 under general social surveys for self-reported hate crimes. That's a significant gap, to say the least, in regards to reported hate crimes. So when I work with agencies across the hate crime spectrum in regards to academia, practitioners and policing, prosecutors, judges, there's a real lack of understanding, and if you can't have baseline data. One of the other issues too, there's no hate crime definition that's consistent in Canada. You can get different varying definitions from organization, from discipline to discipline, organization to organization. So the baseline data is horrible in regards to us tackling as far as policy engagement with the federal government in regards to hate crime. And then there's all the other issues as well. The victim community impact, empirically researched internationally, has certain effect on the community, and we don't have legislation to protect it. And then there's 5 or 6 other ones that I have documented in the criminal code advocacy that I do for to try to get the criminal code amended. But I think it would have a great impact for the communities that are afflicted by this, and it would also have a great impact for academia, practitioners, the judicial system, everything kind of thing. So it does solve, it's like I'm not saying it's going to solve everything, but it would be a great start, baseline start in regards to tackling hate crime. The biggest thing for me is without stats, without a national definition, we can't do the work we need to do. How can we even do our baseline research on hate crime when we're not even collecting it appropriately kind of thing?
So how long is this journey going to take to get from where we are to where we need to be from your point of view?
Well, I just got, it's funny you mentioned that, because just this morning I got an email from the federal government. They're interested in taking another look at this. I've been advocating it since 2007. I remember the first meeting with Rona Ambrose. And so it's been in the works, this advocacy for this, for a couple of decades now, but it's actually getting close, and we'll see where it goes from here kind of thing. So. Good.
Now, Shalini, you raised the issue of this isn't just a legal issue, this is a kind of personal community mindset issue. And you use the phrase, we need to lead from solutions from within. I mean, that's your kind of view here. Tell us more about what that means. What does that look like? Why is that a way forward from your point of view?
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. So I'm going to pick up from where Stephen was talking about with policing, and that'll help me explain my point of view, which is that I think policing is the absolute last action that should happen when we're looking at social issues and when we're looking to resolve something. So when I think about my own children, I'm a parent, I put a lot of thought into imagining these children and who I want them to be and how I'm hoping they'll function. So I think about values, I think about skills, I think about a nurturing environment. I'm trying to raise them with self-esteem. I'm trying to raise them with skills of relationships as they go along. And if I was to wait and just let them go and just wait until one finally, punched someone out on my lawn, and then my response was, let me take that child and confine them and, isolate them and not really talk to them and think about it. It doesn't make any sense to me. And so while I do think policing is important and it has a role and it says something about a society to have decided this is right, this is wrong, and we're going to do something about it, to me, so much more attention needs to be in community, in relationships, in education, in empowering our BIPOC communities in particular to be influential in society, to bring that different point of view, that cultural point of view, that connection, that reconciliation. We've been through so much. So many more resources. So I talk about this idea of healing the fabrics of society. And to me, it happens in community and in social programs, much more than it happens at that end point of what happens when it got so bad.
Tell us more about the healing part. So what do you envisage communities needing to do at the neighborhood level or in the city level from a healing point of view in relation to hate crime?
I love that you asked me that so much, because I was just reflecting and thinking, you asked a question earlier, why are you involved with this? How long have you been involved with this? And I was actually 14 years old when I got paid attention to at school and mobilized in around some activism, and it had to do with teen mental health. And I've thought about mental health my entire life. And then I thought about the environment, and then I thought about racism and colonization. And I describe mental health as that struggle that you have when you're expressing what your experience is like and it's outside of what's considered the norm. I think all of us are severely traumatized in this society, and that's a fact. I think anyone perpetrating racism is severely traumatized, and I think we should consider it that way. Could you imagine if we considered it a mental health problem instead of somehow excusable and people be the way they are, but then we have to victimize these communities here who are visibly showing a different trauma? So I genuinely think we need to invest a lot more in mental health resources, and not always medicalized mental health resources. This is something we also get from our colonized communities, is we still remember those things like connection, food, just being around each other. May I tell one quick story?
Sure.
So I grew up here in Canada, and my people are from India, from East India, from a place called Bihar. And we were the only ones of our extended family who weren't in Bihar. We were the only ones here. And sometimes we would go, and there was this time when we went to India. I was 15 years old. And if you know something about me, I actually went to 14 years old in Alberta before I got my first real friend. Such was racism and the isolation. I didn't have you in school at 11, right? Wish you were there. I made my first real friend at 14, and then at 15, my parents had enough money to bring the family to India for the summer. When we went for months. I think we were going to be there for 2-3 months. I was afraid that if I left now, that person would move on, they'd forget about me, and I'd come back and I wouldn't have a friend again. So I was having such a hard time. I was so depressed, so sad when we were in India. And I'd look to be alone. That's what Canadians do, right? Like find space, be alone. So I'd move to a room where no one else was. And I wouldn't be there 2 minutes where another family member would come in and just be puttering around and folding laundry and do something. Then someone else would come in. So then I would get up and move to another room to be alone. In a couple of minutes, someone come and move stuff around there. The third room, when someone came in, I said, I'm trying to be alone. And they said to me, we can see that. We can see you're having a hard time, and we won't leave you alone. You know, those mental health skills that are in our communities and our cultures, you need to let us help bring them back. Bring them back.
Great, thank you. Now, Henry, you're involved in the kind of work that's just been described by working with junior high kids on this whole space of hate and racism. Tell us about the work and why it's important and what you're finding in working with junior high kids right now. What's that producing for you in terms of helping us move forward in the way you've just heard described?
Yeah, for sure. So thank you very much for having me and for giving me this chance to talk about my initiative. Really, we started developing these workshops about digital citizenship and teaching empathy and encouraging empathy when it comes to online hate and extremism. This is something that in the research project that was mentioned in the video, this was a focus that a lot of students themselves believe that's something that should be talked about, something that should be discussed more, especially coming from other peers. So when you've got, you know, I'm 18, when you got an 18-year-old teaching another 18-year-old or another grade 10 teaching some grade 8s, we found that that's been very powerful and that's been really encouraging, where the people or the students that we're talking to, they become really engaged and they become really open to learning about these really important topics, especially since, you know, these are some of the people that are extremely targeted by online hate because they use social media to a really large extent. And, you know, when we go to these classrooms, we ask them, are you on social media? They all raise their hand. Have you experienced or encountered hateful content? And the vast majority of them have said that they have experienced this sort of stuff online. And that really just says that we do need to address this issue. And these workshops are just one of the many ways that we've tried to do that, by just going into the classroom, having a friendly face to teach them about it, and just going from there, starting that dialogue about empathy and being responsible online.
Is this the kind of thing you're thinking of, Shamin?
I do think this is a lovely initiative. I do think this is a lovely initiative. Actually, when I was back in high school, there was a group of us who did something similar. We put together some programming in around connection, self-esteem, relationships, and drugs, and we delivered it to junior high. I wish there was more of it. I think it's a wonderful relationship, and it creates that, you know, I know high school and junior high doesn't seem that intergenerational, but when you're at that age, it's huge. Yeah. And it creates that mentoring relationship. I think it's beautiful, yeah.
You're working, I found it here at MacEwan. Tell us about the work and how this connects up these three stories you've just heard from your colleagues. How do you see the connection between what the three colleagues have just said and the work you're trying to do? And how does your work help us think about how to unpack hate and get past the hate crime thing?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question and for being able to kind of connect with everyone here today. You know, that mentorship piece I think is key. And this person right beside me, you know, he doesn't know it, but he's been one of my key mentors in this space because we had the opportunity a number of years back to cross paths when we both worked together. And just knowing, you know, Steve's too modest to mention, like he just didn't start the Edmonton Police Service's hate crime unit. He got funding from the federal government to compel them to start a hate crime unit because there wasn't one there. And this is in the post 9/11 climate, right? And so this is where we're starting to see some of those trends in tracking and other considerations there. And I think when we look at some of the work, you know, that Henry's doing with junior high students, I see it also kind of when we see university-based students as well, where there isn't that layer of awareness or understanding around distinctions around hate. And as a result, there's, you know, whether it's misinformation or heightened awareness that, you know, some feel it should be addressed as a hate crime when, as Steve and others have alluded to, it doesn't meet the criminal threshold of a hate crime. So that limits police involvement. But to Shalini's point, that this shouldn't mean we shouldn't intervene in other ways, because it's likely violated some terms of service, whether it's an online platform. It's likely violated maybe a respectful workplace policy if it's in a workplace. It's likely violated some form of conduct that we shouldn't always default to law enforcement as the be-all and end-all. I think that's been part of the challenge. That's been the biggest issue in my awareness, is when we default addressing hate to a law enforcement perspective, it just gives us one part of the aspect of not addressing, some of those root causes or key issues that, unfortunately, in Canada, as I mentioned in the video there, COVID has just really re-amplified biases and discrimination that we know have been around in our country for a very, 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 very long time. We as Canadians just hide it a bit better through our policy like multiculturalism. We hide it through our policies and processes around diversity and inclusion, but we don't collectively track anything around data related to race-based discrimination outside of the hate crime data that we see. And I apologize, I feel I'm gonna poke you in the eye I'm a hand talker, so. But why I say that is that's why you see a lot of areas trying to really promote and advocate for the collection of, whether it's race-based data, gender identity-based data, and how we can cross-reference that form of identity markers and the intersections of those markers with barriers that might be there that we're not aware of just because we're not simply collecting the data. And so when we talk about data from what gets officially reported and recorded through to the police, that's one layer, but we have to do a better job of trying to collect it from various spaces. So that's where with Stop Hate, for example, it provides a centralized space for anyone who is in the province to document a hate incident. It doesn't hit the threshold of a crime, but at least it comes to a centralized document space that we, in collaboration with the Alberta Hate Crimes Committee, have that information. We can follow up if the person reporting chooses they want to be followed up with, but more importantly, it gives us information on what some of the key trends are occurring and happening that might be impacting some of those smaller instances of hate that don't hit the threshold of a crime, but still have impacts on communities. And I think that always gets missed. Whether or not it hits the threshold of a crime, it still impacts communities in very, very similar ways.
And I think it's important for us to recognize that not all hate speech and hate crime is about race. Some of it is about gender identity. For example, there's also a whole raft of issues coming up about attacks against Ukrainians right now here in Canada, which are partly racial, obviously, but it's also connected to the whole war that's going on there. So it's a very complex space. In the data that you've got, what are the patterns you're seeing here in Alberta that we need to be aware of? What are the key patterns that you're seeing in the data?
Yeah, so I mean, we've had the website up and running since 2017. We unfortunately launched it about 3 weeks after the Quebec mosque shooting because we were planning on unrolling it in a more strategic way, I guess you could say. But as soon as that happened, we're like, no, this just needs to get out there. Since 2017, I'd say we've received almost 500 incidents throughout the province. I have to caveat that though. Of the 500, half of them we had to kind of omit or remove because it didn't meet the internal kind of validation process that we have. And I'm not going to walk you through it. I do not want to bore you, but if you're interested, see me after. I can let you know what our methods are in terms of verifying data. So with that, the most common thing that we see reported through the website is race or ethnicity-based discrimination in public spaces. Right, and that's probably over 50% of what we receive, and that's individuals who are doing everyday things, grocery shopping, walking to their car, walking with their family, everyday things, and have a slur or other form of intimidation based on race-based hatred. So that's the most common thing we've seen come through.
Thanks a lot, Stephen. As you gather, this is English, by the way, British English. The Metropolitan Police is part of the problem, it's not part of the solution. And one of the reasons for that is embedded racism in the Metropolitan Police. And I'm not just suggesting that's the case. There are several major documents that show that's the case. And one of the reasons the police commissioner was fired is that she wasn't tackling this issue. Are police part of the problem?
I think, yes, of course. The institute. Yeah,
yeah, he's no longer with them.
Of course, when I actually worked in the hate crime unit that we developed, one of our mandates was to educate our membership on bias policing, institutional bias, et cetera, because we recognize, this was the mid-2000s, that bias policing is an issue, and it still is today. So yes, and I think if you look at the affected communities, they're getting a double whammy here with hate crimes being inflicted upon them, and then poor police response to the communities as well when it comes to proactive policing in areas where they shouldn't be, the racial profiling, for example. And we recognize that with the Alberta Hate Crime Committee. We actually look at, I just had discussions today with a national organization looking at a more holistic approach to hate crime, maybe creating a center of excellence kind of thing where we dive into the issues of institutional racism, bias policing, hate crime, education, enforcement, proactive de-radicalization programs, so that there's a really kind of interdisciplinary, holistic approach to hate crime. That's what we advocate for. The legislative amendment, for example, is one tool of many, at least a dozen that we look at as working toward hate crime. So yes, institutional racism, bias policing exists for a number of reasons. And is it something that should be tackled by police services across Canada? Of course. Is it a part of could it be part of the hate crime unit's mandate? Yes, because they understand these issues. It is hate on communities kind of thing, committed by officers kind of thing. So it's something that they could take. A big advocate of centralized hate crime units as well, to do all these things in a more interdisciplinary kind of approach, using academics and practitioners in other fields to tackle these issues. Not be just a one-trick pony where it's legislation and enforcement. There's at least 12 other things that hate crime units could be doing to tackle these issues. Sure.
So there's the healing work that can be at the level of the family, the neighborhood, the community. There's the work on data that's critical to understanding the dynamics of this, and that better data is part of what we need to see. There's the reform of the law and improved policing practices. What else if you had one magic wand, what would you say we should be doing in this room, given who's in this room? Lots of community organization, Reach itself, lots of people with social influence in this room. What's the one thing we should be taking away? And then I'll throw the question open to the floor. But what's the one thing you think we should be thinking about and looking to do to make a difference to this situation?
I also, can I add one piece to this
Sure.
policing piece?
You have the microphone.
If that's okay. Yeah, so building on your lovely piece about being old. So I know, Asians, we hide how old we are all the time because we seem to visually age differently. But in terms of anti-racism, I feel quite old because I've been involved with this for more than 25 years. And I did want to share a piece because you can hear it from my accent that I spent a lot of time in Ireland. I spent half my life in Ireland and did a lot of my work there. And to build on something that happened in Britain. So in the 90s in Britain, there was a young teenage boy, a black boy, Stephen Lawrence, and he was shot by the police. It was a very significant story, and it stood out, unlike the news that we get from the United States, where it's ubiquitous. And it prompted an inquiry, and a Judge McPherson, took almost 10 years to do this properly. And when he came out with his report in the early 2000s, he named that there was institutional racism in policing. And we're talking about the causes of it because we know in Alberta, policing comes from a history, and in lots of places it comes from a history of colonial control. It's an arm's length mechanism to keep colonial control. But the other piece that he pointed out, which I think we really need to understand, is he said that in the job of policing, you as a human are sent to think about, look at, investigate the worst things happening in your society. And you have to protect yourself psychologically, and you have to do that job. And so you're constantly defensive and you're constantly expecting the worst. And he said, when you psychologically set up a human in that situation, you are setting them up to be racist. That is an outcome of the job. And so it's not just the history, it's not just the structure. We need to understand that. And I think in policing, it needs to be understood. He did say that out of all professions, policing was more prone to functioning in racist ways because of that setup. And we need to understand that if we're going to solve this problem. We need to understand the place, and then we need to understand the mental health of police, right? And I think we need to be very specific about where we want policing in our society and where we're going to solve it from other places. So coming to what do I think we can do, I'm going to pull out a couple other ideas that I think are really important. You've heard some of my ideas. One of them I actually think is the arts. I think the arts are a mechanism through which humans can process human emotion. We develop more of that empathy. We connect more into experiences that we're not used to. And I think a society that invests very well and makes the arts accessible is a society that is able to treat each other better. So I think that is a wonderful thing, and I would love to see something in schools along our GSAs, our gay-straight alliances. What's so powerful about gay-straight alliances is that it allows children to build relationships across oppression and across differences. And it's an alliance of empathy. And I would love to see something like that that's anti-racist in our schools and in our communities. That you could go to an anti-racist alliance and you could build those relationships. So those are a couple ideas.
Same question,
okay.
yeah. What's the big idea you have that we should all think about?
So the big idea I have is not very big, but I think it's all of us can have influence in it as well. As I mentioned, we rely too much on, I would say, the criminal code legislation to kind of address it in a way that we feel is meaningful. But as those of us that have kind of been in this area for a while, we know it's not very impactful, unfortunately. But we don't have enough to kind of, push those boundaries, I would say, because oftentimes when you have these forms of hate-motivated violence or incidents, if our policies outside of a law enforcement perspective aren't set up to address it in any meaningful way, it doesn't get addressed at all, right? Because what I've seen is we often start at the default of something hate-motivated happened, this must be a crime. But if it's not, that doesn't mean we can't address it, right? So whether, again, it goes back to our policies in employment policies, a number of years back, our own province, for example, added a discrimination and harassment under OHS policy, that now employers have to have a plan in terms of how they're going to address discrimination and harassment in a workplace, right? Those are all, again, tangible things that doesn't necessarily have to hit the threshold of a criminal event, but it still is impacting people in various ways. And so I think that's what I really want to encourage, even thinking about, the city we all live in and, having, tools available around addressing hate through even bylaws, right? I know we're still trying to navigate what that looks like in terms of operationalizing it, but that in itself has some teeth that wasn't available before, because now you don't just have to default to a criminal code perspective. There's legislation or a bylaw in this case that can at least guide some form of action. And what I've seen in other areas, I'll draw an example from Oregon. The state of Oregon has gone up to third reading to ban nooses from being able to be present at public protests that are on state grounds because of the racial intimidation that nooses have in the history of the American context, right? And I think that's significant because we know the way our laws are currently set up, and we had really similar examples here in Edmonton, unfortunately, in the last few years, where people can show up with, borderline hate-related symbols, let's say, even though it might not hit a threshold of overtly being hateful, it's still intimidation. It still has layers of intimidation that if you don't have the, understanding of the context, it's just going to look like someone with, a noose or a rope, tied in a circle, or a tiki torch, or what have you, right? And so I think that's where we need to collectively, all of us in this room, be able to respectfully push people to courageously act and say, okay, it doesn't hit the criminal threshold. What else can we do? Because if we're not acting in any way, it's allowing to continue. So that's my kind of wish list, I guess.
Stephen, what's your big idea that we should all take home and think about acting on?
Well, I mean, I'm a big proponent of the criminal code amendment change for sure. I think that's a big one for me. Again, hate crime units across Canada have to be built up and resourced so that we can handle this. including the conveyance of information in regards to what hate crime is, what it's not. I mean, there's a lot of misinformation up there what it is, and I think it's confusing to the public. I think the governments have an obligation to resource hate crime units so they can educate when police can intervene and when it's not, and then you can go to other initiatives, such as Henry's here, in regards to how to deal with online hate and how to deal with hate incidents that aren't crimes, that don't meet the threshold, and how do we deal with that as a community kind of thing that has to be done. So that would be my idea, like a kind of a centralized approach to that.
And your suggestion that we should all think about?
Yeah, thanks. So I think from my experiences and from my research, I found that young people are really impacted by this issue, but they're also really interested. And I think when you've got, nonprofit leaders, community leaders, and policymakers, if they can take into account the experiences of young people and their ideas as a whole and start taking that into account when it comes to taking next steps, whether it be all the ones previously mentioned, if you take that youth perspective into account, I think that'll be have a really positive change.
Thanks. Now, let's have some questions from the floor. Do we have some roving microphones? We have a roving microphone. Yes, there at the back. There's the microphone. So if you want to ask a question, just wave.
Thank you. Great presentation from everybody. I'm curious about one of what I see as one of the big root causes of kind of this increase in hate crimes or hate motivated incidents, and that's kind of it's not a local issue. It's a global issue that is perpetuated through online communities that don't start and stop at at the school doors, or don't start and stop at the police's jurisdiction or in a local community. And so I think to Henry and to everyone else, how, like, what with a generation of people who are really exposed to hate online and indoctrinated in that, how do these local solutions address these? I mean, Stephen mentioned, hate crime units throughout the country, but they're all localized solutions to really a problem that isn't just national, it's global. And so I was wondering if the panel could speak to kind of how we approach that issue.
Anybody want to pick that one up?
I can start, unless Henry, you want to add?
Yeah, I can just start and say, that, and we were talking about this before it all started, about the lack of accountability when it's an online issue. And I think that's something where, even though we're just doing these workshops and it's about education on that front, when you're becoming personally accountable and becoming a better, digital citizen, that's at least one good place to start, and then encouraging that across your peers and your friends and family.
In regards to online hate, it's an international issue. I'm always perplexed sometimes on how to deal with it as well, because how do you have private businesses self-regulate, and are they going to self-regulate appropriately, and what are they going to self-regulate? Those are big issues. A lot of things they talk about is, well, if you want us to regulate, if you want us to regulate, give us the legislation to do it, or provide us with the legislation to assist. So again, sometimes legislation is required. It's like the hammer that starts to move action kind of thing sometimes. And if we leave it in the world of like decentralized, deregulated, and hope for the best, I think we're going to be in trouble. There's also a lot of jurisdictional issues. How do you regulate with an ISP that's in Ireland, with the users in the US and the consumers are in Canada? Those are really complex issues to deal with jurisdictionally. Even if they breach the hate propaganda charges, you still got issues, kind of thing. So it's a complex problem. And again, I like what everyone's saying here about education, starting with youth and moving forward in regards to how harmful it is and impactful it is to communities.
Everyone.
Okay, you're gonna have to give me the hook for sure, because this is the area of research I've been doing over the last number of years. So I have so much to say.
Are you two in cahoots?
Yeah, I paid him $20 to ask the question.
But typical academic.
Yeah, but the too long didn't read version of your question is, we're seeing the social media platforms being utilized in ways that have not even been imagined when they came up 10 plus years ago. Even as recent as the unfortunate shooting in Buffalo from 2 weeks back, where the shooter targeted an African-American supermarket. His ideologies permeating online, but also sharing his manifesto online to others who want to kind of share that. But as problematic as that is, even more problematic, and we saw this even in the New Zealand mosque shooting, how various platforms are being hopped to elevate a message, right? So for example, with the New Zealand mosque shooter, they started their content on 8chan, and then it went to 4chan, and then it went to Reddit, and then it went to Facebook. In his manifesto, he had Facebook Live links that people were able to access in real time and then watch what he was doing in real time. Platforms had no idea or no preparation or no understanding or forecasting that people are going to be platform hopping in this way. The New Zealand mosque shooting changed the way that many of the major social media platforms address online hate in a way that's more meaningful now than it was before. Because historically what you saw happen is, you know, I'll use Facebook as the example. Facebook over the last number of years has hired like 3,000 plus contract moderators, content moderators, to just flag, review flagged content. Hate speech or borderline hate speech that doesn't violate their terms of service because it's not overt in nature, that gets missed, right? And that's another story that I won't have time to tell, but that's an even more important story because for every overt slur or language or content that now AI can pick up and automatically remove, you have other more subtle cloaked forms of bias or discrimination under a comment that at its face value isn't discriminatory by any means, but when you look at it in the context of what is being said, it's definitely, you know, trying to send a message around othering and how that fuels people's perceptions. But in the context of Facebook moderation, when you have hate speech, borderline racist language or hateful language, but you're also competing with other emerging threats or issues such as a live, Facebook Live killing, anything involving children. Oftentimes the hate speech aspect gets ignored inadvertently because of the focus on some of the more pressing issues that the content moderators have to have. So in that context, the level of cloaked discrimination and bias that's able to permeate is the biggest challenge, in my opinion, based on the research I've been doing, because there isn't a way to track that or capture it, because they're likely not violating in terms of service. They're likely not violating, freedom of expression, freedom of speech. And then also, as Steve alluded to, when you have now our federal government looking at how to do content moderation on the various media platforms, there is pushback in terms of violating potentially freedom of expression and charter violations. So it's extremely complex. We're at a space now where the overt stuff is easier to catch because they're able to scrape a lot of that with AI tools, but it's the more subtle cloaked pieces that I think is the next challenge. And if anyone's interested to see what I mean by that, just go to Rebel Media's YouTube channel, look at the comment sections, and I'll leave it there.
Well, don't do that. Don't do it. It's bad for your health. It's bad for your health. Your teeth will fall out.
Well, Irfan, having taken a bucket, filled it with gold coins for you, I'm going to throw a couple pennies in, right, at the level of following that on this question. But nevertheless, I'm going to share a couple thoughts. One is about the social media space. I think what we want to look to in the future, and I do not understand this space as deeply as Irfan or other people here, those who know me know that I can't even live there. Like, I just know it's bad for my mind, and even though it's good for business, it's good for all kinds of things, I can't seem to get there. So I'm your one person where someone's texting me what's going on online if I really need to see it. But I do know that there are some folks in other parts of the world, in particular I know of a group in Europe, but I know that it's not ready to launch yet, who are looking to create an online platform where you do pay for a membership to be involved. And when that starts to come in, that it's a socially driven, community-driven thing. When that starts to come in, I think we need to think about this. We need to think about, rather than thinking we're getting all this for free and we're signing up and we're being manipulated by these gigantic multi-billion-dollar organizations that are like really manipulating us, that we may look forward to this idea that we can buy in to something that is more socially controlled and we can have all that. So it's just one idea. I don't know a lot about that kind of thing. But the other thing in terms of internationally that I think we need to be thinking about is this idea of, here, let me frame it this way. Racism, I believe, is created and propagated based on intentional misinformation, behaviors that hurt and traumatize people, not allowing the healing to take place. So people get stuck, confused, and they are in reactive patterns. So if I could just, so in my day work, I do work as an education consultant around anti-racism. And if I was to give you one quick summary, that's what happens. People intentionally create misinformation. Every stereotype we have, every piece of misinformation we have can probably be tracked back to have been made on purpose to serve an economic goal. So it's intentionally created, and we need to start learning what those are and start putting out new, clear information. So it's like the emperor has no clothes, that story. And I'll give you an example. Did anyone grow up in this era? Are we still saying this? Like for decades and decades and decades, this era where we talk about the United States of America as the leaders of the free world, and you know, who's saying that? They're saying that, but this idea that apparently they're the most free, most whatever, everyone wants to go there for whatever reasons. Like, that's an emperor has no clothes situation. And we have to start saying, it's an extremely problematic society, and we really don't want to be influenced and driven so much by what's happening there. Like, at this stage, you actually have to have surgery to appear on media in that country. Like, there's something quite wrong with that. We need to start taking the veils off, calling things what they are, putting out clear information so that we're not so vulnerable to being manipulated in these ways. So that's just a piece I need to add there.
And look at the parallels with the whole COVID information stuff and the work Timothy Caulfield is doing here at the University of Alberta on comparing the reality of the science with the complete mythologies that have been promoted for real revenue reasons with Hollywood quality production values of nonsense. All will be different when Elon Musk takes over Twitter. It'll be a lot worse. Another question from the audience. Yep.
So tying on to what Levi was asking about, oftentimes this problem is, it's so vast and there's so many different facets to it that it's hard to kind of wrap your mind around. And at times I think people feel overwhelmed, and there's almost that desperation in terms of like, what can you do to tackle this? Because like Levi said, there's no boundaries, there's no where that information stops. So thinking from a reach perspective, we're a local organization that works in Edmonton. What are some things that can be done locally, right? Where you can make meaningful change, whether that's bystander training, and stuff like that, where we can see meaningful, impactful change that can help. Obviously, it's not going to solve the entire problem, but start tackling that. And along with that, like, whose responsibility is that? Do you see that from a government side, from community side? Like, how do you see that?
I always go to the education component, education. This should be in our schools. This should be taught at the high school level minimally. Should be part of core curriculum in universities in regards to how to handle this kind of stuff and how to avoid it as well. The thing I was going to say as well is that the resourcing, just to go to Levi's question in regards to, like, I think it's a public safety issue too. When the rhetoric's out there and the propaganda's out there, people buy into almost anything sometimes, and they will take action based on their belief systems, and then we move into violent action. So that's where I'm kind of coming from here as well. So what do you do about that? Well, you resource it properly. So you can't let private business self-regulate, or you can try to advocate for that. But if you resource police services with hate crime units, you have analysts that are monitoring the net. So when I was in the hate crimes unit at EPS, we would have online operators, UC operators into the hate websites and working with the bad guys. And then I can actually send messages to New York or to Perth, Australia, or to Hong Kong, or to somewhere in the States, or to Red Deer in regards to rhetoric that's happening online that's causing public safety issues. The police can then go knock on their door. And so when you look at Buffalo, what could have maybe been proactive here to prevent this, if that kind of interconnectivity in regards to intelligence and analysts were done, you could do a lot more in regards to public safety, as opposed to leaving it up to issues that have to do with the charter, freedom of expression, policing, self-regulating, all this kind of stuff, which makes it very complicated. There is an approach that can be done if it's resourced properly. That's what I think.
Just take one more comment, and then we'll go to another question from Bob.
Yeah, just back to your question, I totally agree. When it comes to education, I think that's something that should be taught at the high school level or junior high level, and that should be supported by, policymakers and then community organizations as well.
And don't forget the point about the arts. and about the power of art, drama, dance, whatever it may be, to bring these issues to the fore as well. There's something very powerful about going to an exhibition where you're seeing the impact of racism and hate in visual terms or in other terms. So don't forget the art side of this as well. I'm going to take another question from Bob.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for being here, because you make me feel younger.
Yeah. He's so old he remembers when Burger King was a prince.
You asked the panel about one big thing that they could do. Well, Henry is doing it right now. He's doing the big thing. And Henry, I applaud your courage, because it takes a lot of courage to do that. And particularly when you're competing with Tucker Carlson and Ezra Levant and all of those lunatics. Keep it up, keep it up. And you know, I hope you found the next generation for your project, because you're going to move on, but keep doing it, because it is a big thing. And yeah, I applaud you. Thanks.
Will the project survive? You're going to university somewhere in another jurisdiction for some apparent reason. Can't understand it. But have you got successors behind you ready to keep this going?
The plan is to continue the The plan is to continue the project going into the next school year as well. So should keep going.
Yeah, let's keep this going. Helen, last question.
So if you could speak about partnership, collaboration, and priorities for REACH. Thanks.
Yeah, what can REACH be doing, given what you know about the organization? So start with you. You have a microphone.
So yeah, I was familiarizing myself with the programs that REACH is doing. I'm involved with one, Coalitions Creating Equity, and so there's an opportunity for people to get together in that program. I think I had this one ping idea just now, and I think it could fit into one of your programs, which is this may sound controversial, or it may sound like a punchline, so forgive me if I'm not saying it in a sensitive or nuanced way, but there could be some parenting classes for white parents on understanding racism and raising children who can understand this and then kind of break some of the generational inheritances and then not be more vulnerable later on when they're struggling and having a hard time. So that was one idea. You do have programs in around early childhood learning, and I would be remiss, I know it's not REACH, but I know people are involved. If I didn't mention that this, because I do chair the City of Edmonton's Anti-Racism Advisory Committee, and the city did pass this incredible strategy in February, and that involved a lot of community collaboration. I think we're currently at a tension between community and administration on how to move this forward, because we do want to do it in an anti-racist, decolonized way outside of the traditional systems, and the traditional systems are usually the ones who implement things. So maybe REACH can also help with collaboration, with partnership, to empower that you know, that voice and that idea of how do we do things outside of traditional systems so that we can create more models that are anti-racist, decolonized, and give them more fuel. You know, when they haven't been supported and they haven't been invested in, then we can't show you the big models that we're imagining and that we think can happen. But I do think they can happen with support. So that's an idea.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, no, carry on.
Oh yeah, so I think REACH as convener, right? I think, you know, even Adil, you mentioned what can REACH be doing a bit, you know, more in that space, and I think, you know, convening, you know, whether it's sessions like these outside of an AGM, even the work that REACH did with, as Shalini mentioned, Coalitions Creating Equity. I know the stuff we've done in the past of having even understanding hate sessions. Like I mentioned in the video, we also now have a module that we're ready to share around supporting victims of hate that we have available as a workshop. That, you know, collaborations with REACH is also you know, putting my McEwen hat on now, always happy to have those connection points. And so I think it's just being able to, because we have students that are just looking for information to be consumed in a way that not only gives them the information, but also gives them the credentials in the context of whether volunteer hours or education building, that now whatever discipline they're a part of, they now have this skill set. I did a session earlier today for HR class of our future HR leaders around EDI and human resources. And I was actually shocked of how much I even talked. I talk a lot, but I was even shocked how much I talked with the students about the impact that they have as practitioners in HR around EDI. And so I think when we're able to elevate some of this discourse, and groups such as REACH are able to be that convener, both locally but also with the educational institutions, I would love to see more of that, and I can volunteer our institution to help out as well.
I think they should be you could do a formal program on victim service or victim advocacy on hate crime, for hate crime victims, and have it very diverse for different community organizations in Edmonton that would be able to assist victims of hate crime. Where their particular community would be, I think, a really formal, structured kind of victim service program that is in alignment with the Alberta government as well. I think that's important to have, because it's the victim services program, the concepts there are built. It's just a matter of tailoring them for hate crime victimization, something that I advocate for in my training. And then secondly is for the public, a lot of times they don't understand the difference between hate speech, hate propaganda, hate crime, hate incident. It becomes very confusing, and it causes division between traditional systems and non-traditional. So I think that workshops on hate crime are really important to the community as well.
Yeah, and mine's kind of similar to what was said before about working with educational institutions, but one of the difficulties with my project, it's been pretty difficult to integrate our workshops into the public school board just because of administrative issues and the sort of bureaucracy that goes with that. I know that's something that's really hard to deal with, and it's probably something that couldn't really be changed. But going forward, if it'd be easier to partner with big organizations like that and to get the content into those different communities, that would be something to look forward to.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, panel. Can we give the panel a round of applause? And a lot for all of us to think about, so thank you very much. Jen.
Just before I call Matt up here, I just wanted to give a little thank you to each of you. It was just absolutely amazing. I particularly loved the last question and some great ideas that you gave to us. You're all incredible speakers. I really don't think you should go to university somewhere else. I think Stephen tried. You all tried. Stephen, it's always great working with you. Irfan, Shalini, that was amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. So I have a little gift card for you.
Great. Yeah, it's just so incredible to stand next to a room of experts here in our own community who are helping support people who are experiencing racism and hate crimes in our community. So just very grateful for your time and for coming. So thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. And thank you also to Stephen, our wonderful moderator. I don't know if I could listen to 12 hours, but that was really awesome. So thank you.